I'm Dilek Tuna and you're watching A News. Let's see the main headlines this hour. Washington relaxes Iran oil sanctions, but Tehran denies JD Vance's claim to allow nuclear inspectors. Russia and Ukraine have intensified cross-border attacks with deadly strikes reported on both sides. And North Korea has pledged to accelerate its military build-up, citing growing tensions with the United States. Washington and Tehran have confirmed major economic and security breakthroughs following high-level peace talks in Switzerland. Iran secured critical sanctions relief and the unfreezing of billions in assets while escalating standoffs over naval control in the Strait of Hormuz. Our report has the details.
A tense diplomatic breakthrough driven by military pressure. US President Donald Trump and Iranian chief negotiator Mohammad Bagher Khalibaf have confirmed major economic and military agreements following Swiss talks. Tehran has secured critical oil and banking waivers alongside the release of $12 billion in frozen assets. But Trump mandates this capital be spent exclusively on American agricultural imports.
Money that's being unfrozen is going to be used to buy food, and the food's going to be bought exclusively through the United States from our farmers. And corn, soybeans, all of the things they need are going to be bought from our farmers. So our farmers are very happy. I've had a lot of calls. They were very happy about this.
The American president linked this diplomatic shift directly to hard military action, marking the one-year anniversary of Operation Midnight Hammer, a strategic strike he claims permanently altered the regional balance.
It was the most successful attack that anyone's ever seen with a bomber that totally wiped out their nuclear potential. If we didn't do that, you'd have no Israel right now. They were 2 weeks away from having a nuclear weapon.
Tehran, meanwhile, rejects Washington's narrative, framing the signed oil and banking waivers as a resistance victory. In transit, Khalibaf confirmed the temporary exemptions are legally secured, but warned that pre-war control over the strategic Strait of Hormuz is permanently over.
Everyone should know that the administration of the Strait will never return to the way it was before the war. These temporary restrictions must be lifted until we are able to remove the sanctions completely.
While both nations agreed to a direct shipping hotline to prevent overnight clashes in the waterway, Washington warns its total naval blockade can reactivate within 15 minutes if Tehran violates the pact.
New statements have been issued regarding the talks between Washington and Tehran. Iran has responded to reports concerning its nuclear program, international inspections and military capabilities. Turaj Shireliliu has more.
Iran's foreign ministry refuted reports that Tehran will grant access to International Atomic Energy Agency to inspect its civilian nuclear sites bombed by Israel and US last June. Spokesman Esmail Baghai also told a weekly press briefing that Iranian negotiators did not meet with the UN nuclear watchdog chief in Switzerland. To a question on whether Iran's nuclear program was discussed with the US officials, he said the issue will be considered after completion of the 60-day period on implementation of the Memorandum of Understanding. Baghai also stressed the reciprocal basis of the memorandum, saying that the nuclear issue will not be discussed if the US fails to carry out its obligations. The spokesman categorically rejected reports that Iran's military might was discussed with the US officials. He said that the ballistic missiles capability was not a subject on the agenda of the Swiss talks, adding that it will not be negotiated with any other party either. Baghai further ruled out any role by the European Union in implementing the Iran-US MOU. He said the European bloc isolated itself by taking side with the US and Israel to reimpose the UN Security Council's nuclear sanctions on Iran last year. When asked about US officials' statements on spending Iran's unfrozen assets, the spokesman rejected any imposition of its purchase list. Turaj Shiralilu from Iranian Foreign Ministry for A News.
Omanian Sultan Haytham bin Tariq Al Said received Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in Muscat on Tuesday. The meeting focused on the latest developments in US-Iran negotiations, as well as efforts to resume shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. According to Oman's Foreign Ministry, Sultan Haytham voiced support for the ongoing talks and expressed hope for their success in achieving a peaceful and lasting resolution to all outstanding issues. Discussions also covered the resumption and security of maritime navigation through the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's nuclear file, and other related regional challenges. While diplomatic contacts between Israel and Lebanon continue, the situation along the border remains fragile. Efforts to advance a possible agreement are underway, but concerns over the durability of the ceasefire persist. Here's the latest on developments in the region.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the country's military leadership have said Israel will maintain its military presence in southern Lebanon. In a joint statement issued after a security meeting on Monday, officials said the Israeli military would continue operations aimed at maintaining a security zone and preventing threats against Israel. The meeting was attended by Netanyahu, Defense Minister Israel Katz, Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir, and Northern Command Chief Ori Gordon. The statement stressed that the security of Israeli citizens and military personnel remains a top priority. The announcement came after talks between Iran and the United States in Switzerland, where efforts to reduce regional tensions and halt military activity across several fronts, including Lebanon, were discussed.
We want an agreement with Lebanon. We feel that there is no reason why an agreement with Lebanon cannot be taken forward. The only impediment is the terrorist organization of Hezbollah, which is why we believe that they should be disarmed and dismantled. Now, however that happens, then obviously Israel will be in favor of that, whether it's through diplomacy or whether it's through military force.
In April, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio hosted rare direct talks between Israeli and Lebanese officials. Both sides said the meeting was constructive. Despite diplomatic efforts, fighting between Israel and Hezbollah has continued in recent months. A ceasefire announced on June 20th remains largely in place. Many displaced people sheltering in tents along Beirut's waterfront say they are not confident the ceasefire will last. Fears of renewed fighting are preventing some from returning home. Lebanese security sources say the truce has mostly held. However, there have been reports of artillery fire near Tyre, the use of sound grenades and Israeli drone flights over Beirut. The conflict has also strained a temporary US-Iran deal aimed at reducing regional tensions. Tehran has accused Washington of failing to meet commitments to help end fighting in Lebanon. US Vice President JD Vance said there had been progress in talks related to Lebanon and that negotiations were continuing.
Turning to Eastern Europe, a deadly cycle of retaliatory strikes has escalated between Russia and Ukraine. A Ukrainian missile attack on Russia's Voronezh region killed 5 people and injured dozens, striking a missile electronics plant. Within hours, Moscow retaliated with overnight airstrikes across Ukraine, wounding 6 civilians and forcing Kyiv residents to bomb shelters. It comes as Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Moscow is ready to resume peace negotiations with Kyiv from the point where they left off. Inga Ruginian has resigned as Lithuania's Prime Minister, bringing her Social Democratic-led government to an end after a reshuffle of the ruling coalition. The outgoing cabinet held its final meeting on Tuesday, at which ministers unanimously approved a resolution on their resignation. The resignation comes after a reconfiguration of the governing coalition. Earlier in June, the Lithuanian Social Democratic Party ended its cooperation with the Dawn over the Neman Party, accusing it of populist policies. Following her resignation, the President has now 15 days to nominate a new candidate for Prime Minister.
Okay, I will give this.
And over in the UK, Andy Burnham looks set to become Britain's next Prime Minister as the Labour leadership contest gathers pace following Keir Starmer's resignation. Senior party members are lining up behind the former Greater Manchester Mayor, but a few potential challengers are considering entering the race to give Burnham some competition.
Andy Burnham remains the clear frontrunner to replace Prime Minister Keir Starmer after receiving growing support from senior Labour figures. Starmer announced his resignation on Monday, soon after Burnham formally launched his leadership bid after being sworn in as MP for Makerfield. He has since secured a significant endorsement from Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who has decided not to run himself and is instead backing Burnham's campaign. The support has fueled speculation that Burnham could become Labour leader without facing a serious challenger. However, senior party figures are still considering whether to enter the race, including Chief Secretary to the Treasury Darren Jones and former Armed Forces Minister Al Khans. Meanwhile, Starmer is to remain in office until a new leader is decided. He chaired his first cabinet meeting on Tuesday since announcing his resignation. Labour's National Executive Committee is expected to meet in the coming weeks to finalise the timetable for the leadership contest. If Burnham is elected unopposed, he could become both Labour leader and Prime Minister as early as next month. Meanwhile, opposition parties continue to demand a general election, including Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch and the right-wing Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. Reaction from voters has been mixed. Some are questioning whether politicians are focusing on the issues that matter most to local communities. Others are expressing cautious optimism that Burnham could bring fresh ideas to the government. Starmer's resignation follows mounting pressure from Labour MPs after weeks of poor polling and internal criticism. All eyes are now on whether any major challenger emerges to test Burnham's path to number 10. Zaina Farizadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
A decade ago, British voters made a decision that reshaped the country's future and sent shockwaves across Europe. In a historic referendum, the UK voted to leave the EU, setting in motion years of political upheaval, economic debate and complex negotiations.
This means that the UK has voted to leave the European Union.
10 years ago, Britain voted to leave the European Union, a decision that became known as Brexit, combining Britain and exit. The debate centred on control. Supporters of leaving said Britain should make its own laws, control immigration, manage its own money, and negotiate independent trade deals. The Leave campaign was backed by figures including Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson. Those who wanted Britain to remain said EU membership supported the economy, made trade with Europe easier, and gave the UK greater international influence. Then Prime Minister David Cameron backed staying in the bloc. Cameron called the referendum because his Conservative Party was divided over Europe and under pressure from anti-EU campaigners. On June 23, 2016, voters were asked whether the UK should remain in or leave the EU. The result, announced the next day, was narrow but historic. 52% voted to leave, while 48% voted to remain. Cameron resigned the morning after the vote. Theresa May, who succeeded him as Prime Minister, triggered Article 50 in 2017, formally beginning the exit process. Britain formally left the European Union on January 31, 2020, ending nearly 5 decades of membership. Though many practical changes took effect only after the transition period ended on December 31st that year. A decade after the referendum, the question is no longer only how Britain left. It is what leaving has cost.
Brexit has, exactly as economists predicted, had a significant negative impact on the UK economy. The UK economy is clearly weaker and smaller than it would have been in the absence of Brexit. Politically, of course, it's much harder to say. I would say two things. One is that we've had a period of political instability since Brexit, and that was not entirely down to Brexit.
But Brexit's impact has not been limited to Britain. It has also reshaped the European Union, forcing the bloc to adapt to the departure of one of its largest economies, biggest military powers, and most influential members.
Brexit obviously has been negative for the UK, but the EU was weakened by the loss of the UK, and that's particularly important in the current geopolitical environment. And the EU would be much stronger if it were to be reassociated with the UK in some form, particularly given the economic, geopolitical, and security challenges we face. Thanks again to Trump's destabilizing influence, but also to the broader trends of the EU, the US, and China. And so I think far-sighted European leaders ought to say, let's put us, yes, of course, we want an economically beneficial relationship and we have to defend our own interests. But in the medium to long run, we would be much stronger with the UK on the inside in some form. And really, that should be something more of a priority, perhaps, for European Union leaders than it currently is.
10 years on, Brexit is no longer just the story of a country leaving the European Union. It is the story of a political promise tested by economic reality, and of a nation still trying to define what sovereignty, prosperity, and control mean outside the bloc.
We'll continue with the main stories of the day after a short break. Stay with us.
Looking back on the past is important to learn from experience. It is like a chronicle, page by page. War, Auschwitz, love, humor.
What was the atmosphere like in your home? Perhaps even a particular smell that you associated with?
The smell of the theater. Soviet Union had many shortcomings, and the world we live in today gives us little reason for optimism.
And welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you today. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Welcome back. You're watching A News. US President Donald Trump has praised what he called a great relationship with Venezuela, saying Washington is taking tremendous amounts of oil from the country.
Venezuela, by the way, has been amazing. We are really having a great relationship with that country, taking out tremendous amounts of oil, far, far more than that particular war cost, many, many times. Sending it to Houston, sending it to Louisiana, sending it to lots of places. And Venezuela is also doing well. Venezuela is doing better than it's done in maybe ever. So it's been an amazing situation. Where did you ever hear of getting money back from the war by 42 times over, right, Pete? Nobody does that.
Now to South America, where Colombia is awaiting its final verified election result after a deeply divisive presidential race. The left-wing candidate is challenging tens of thousands of ballot boxes, while the apparent winner is already receiving congratulations from aboard.
Colombia is facing uncertainty after left-wing candidate Ivan Cepeda challenged the election process following a razor-thin preliminary loss to right-wing outsider Abelardo de la Espriella. Cepeda says his team has filed complaints and will contest 57,189 ballot boxes. He urged supporters to remain calm, saying the country remains deeply polarized and that final results have yet to be confirmed.
I want to make a very cordial call for serenity and calm. And if there are public expressions in favor of or against any particular circumstance, they should take place strictly within the framework of calm and peaceful mobilization. If such mobilizations take place, which I want to be clear, we are not calling for.
Initial results showed De La Espriella with 49.66% of the vote, ahead of Cepeda by around 250,000 votes. Under Colombian law, a final verified count overseen by notaries and judges is required, although it was not yet clear whether that process would alter the preliminary outcome. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump congratulated De La Espriella, saying he looked forward to building a strong relationship with Colombia. Trump said De La Espriella had called to thank him for his support and predicted ties between the two countries would improve.
Yes, sir. I'm from Colombia. So he called me last night and he thanked me for the endorsement. He won. He won the election. He wasn't anticipated to win, but he won, and he won handily. It's just an honor. He was just a good man.
The result points to a shift to the right in Colombia and adds to a broader rightward trend across Latin America.
And over to Europe. At least 18 people have died in France as an intense heat wave continues to grip large parts of Europe. Among the victims were 2 children aged 2 and 4 who were found unconscious in a family car. 3 elderly people aged 80 to 95 died from heat-related complications in the Bordeaux region, while 13 others drowned across France as many sought relief from the extreme temperatures. Belgium says it has issued visas to a Taliban delegation to attend an EU meeting on migration in Brussels. The visit would mark the first time the European Union has hosted Taliban officials since the group returned to power in Afghanistan in 2021. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
Belgium has confirmed that 5 visas have been issued to members of a Taliban delegation for talks with European Union officials in Brussels. The meeting is expected to focus on migration, particularly the return and readmission of Afghan officials who do not have the right to stay in the European Union. According to Belgium's foreign ministry, the visas are highly restricted. They are valid only for travel to Belgium and only for a very limited period. The European Commission invited the Taliban officials last month as part of discussions on deportations of Afghan migrants. Officials say some EU member states are looking at ways to return people who have committed serious crimes or may pose a security threat. The Commission has stressed that the meeting is technical in nature and does not amount to recognition of Taliban rule in Afghanistan. Human rights groups have raised concerns, warning that talks could put Afghans at risk and undermine EU values. So far, Taliban authorities here in Kabul have not commented on the delegation's visit to Europe. For now, the EU is presenting the talks as a migration management discussion. But the presence of Taliban officials in Brussels is likely to remain politically sensitive. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A-News.
Georgia's ruling party is escalating its confrontation with Europe, with the Prime Minister equating the European Parliament with the Soviet Union. This as the Council of Europe prepares to vote on a resolution accusing Tbilisi of building a one-party dictatorship. Anini Nikolashvili reports from Tbilisi.
Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kabakhidze is locked in a battle against top European institutions and he's not backing down. He told a press conference today that the European Parliament was behaving like the Soviet Union. At issue is a report being discussed at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which accuses Georgia of democratic backsliding. It warns that Tbilisi's ban on opposition parties is incompatible with Council of Europe membership. In response, Kabakhidze dismissed the assembly as completely devalued, calling its resolution absurd. He also announced that Georgia will pursue a formal non-recognition policy toward the European Parliament. It's the same legal framework Tbilisi applies to Russia over occupied Abkhazia and South Ossetia. He went further, stating that EU pressure to repeal Georgia's controversial grants law amounts to Brussels financing a sixth attempt at revolution. Kabakhidze pledged a, quote, appropriate response if such efforts continue. The pressure, however, is not coming from Brussels alone. The United Kingdom has sanctioned TV Imedi and Post TV, two of Georgia's most watched television channels. The move has prompted businesses to suspend cooperation with both outlets. Kabakhidze responded by calling Prime Minister Keir Starmer on the day of his resignation the world's lowest-rated prime minister. For a government facing censure from two major European bodies and now London, it is showing no signs of staying quiet. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Kazakh Prime Minister Olsas Bektenov met Chinese Premier Li Qiang during a visit to China. The talks focused on cooperation in trade, investment, agriculture and transport. Both sides highlighted the continued development of their strategic partnership. According to official figures, trade between Kazakhstan and China exceeded $48 billion in 2025. As part of the visit, Bektenov also attended a session dedicated to the Belt and Road Initiative. He said Kazakhstan remains a key transit route across Eurasia and noted that significant investment has been made in transport infrastructure in recent years. The session discussed trade routes, transport links and the future of regional economic cooperation.
$30 milyard көлемінде инвестиция салды. Қытай қосылған құны жоғары.
As climate change continues to pose growing challenges for vulnerable island nations, new support is being made available to help communities strengthen their resilience. The Commonwealth Secretariat and Azerbaijan's COP29 presidency have announced a new funding initiative for small island developing states.
The Commonwealth Secretariat and Azerbaijan's COP29 presidency have launched a call for proposals to support climate action projects across the 25 Commonwealth small island developing states. The announcement coincides with the start of London Climate Action Week and follows the launch of two joint flagship initiatives in April 2026. Under the COP29 Presidency Commonwealth Fund for Small Island Developing States, governments can apply for grants of up to $200,000 for projects addressing the growing impacts of climate change. Over the next 5 years, the $5 million fund will support into practical action by building institutional capacity, strengthening policy and regulatory frameworks, attracting additional public and private investment, and promoting partnership platforms developed through COP29 presidency initiatives. It will support practical, high-impact projects with a particular focus on Indigenous and local communities, women and young people. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is vowing to accelerate his country's military build-up, saying US and South Korean actions have pushed the region to the brink of nuclear war. Laura Westbrook reports from Hong Kong.
In a speech during a three-day meeting of the ruling Workers' Party, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un accused the US and South Korea of making the security situation on the Korean peninsula more dangerous. Kim says Washington and Seoul's expanding cooperation includes pursuing the acquisition of nuclear-powered submarines by South Korea. In the face of these developments, Kim says Pyongyang needed to accelerate efforts to expand and strengthen a powerful and absolutely reliable deterrent for South self-defense. State media says that the meeting agreed that expanding its nuclear forces and exercising its position as a nuclear weapons state is the way to respond to an unpredictable international military and political situation. Kim also ordered the buildup of conventional weapons and accelerated construction of a 10,000-ton strategic guided missile cruiser. Pyongyang has repeatedly declared itself an irreversible nuclear state since the 2019 summit between Kim and US President Donald Trump in Hanoi collapsed over the scope of its denuclearization and sanctions relief. Analysts say that Kim's latest comments underscore Pyongyang's continued rejection of denuclearization and push for recognition as a nuclear state. Earlier this month, Kim's powerful sister said the North's nuclear policy was a line of no retreat. And last week, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung said President Trump had told him it was time to pay attention to the North Korea issue. He told reporters he had told the US president at a meeting of the G7 in France that sanctions on the North were ineffective. Pyongyang is under multiple sets of sanctions aimed at curbing its nuclear and missile programs. Laura Westbrook for A News in Hong Kong.
And now in updates from the World Cup, Argentina and France strengthened their credentials as title contenders with important victories from key scorers Lionel Messi and Kylian Mbappe. While attention now turns to today's fixtures as the group stage continues across North America. Let's take a look at the recent results. Now, Argentina 2-0 against Austria in Group J, France 3-0 against Iraq in Group L, Norway 3-2 against Senegal in Group L, Jordan 1-2 against Algeria in Group J. A short break now, and when we return, we'll continue with the main stories shaping the region. Stay tuned.
We are in Seoul's Republic of Korea, a country that for more than 70 years has lived in the shadow of unfinished war.
I was 18 years old when the Korean War broke out. My two brothers were dragged out to the front yard of the village public hall and forcibly subjected to a trial under the name of People's Trial.
The military demarcation line, created after the Korean War, became a massive wall, preventing separated families from meeting.
Less than a kilometer away lies North Korea.
지금 우리 무장력은 그 어떤 위기에도 대응할 철저한 준비가 되어 있으며
Подписанный сегодня договор предусматривает в том числе оказание взаимной помощи в случае агрессии против одного из участников.
Russian-Ukraine war now is connected with North Korean participation in Russian army.
The complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is the only outcome that we will find acceptable.
If the U.S. persists in such hostile policy towards the DPRK, there will never be denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Welcome back. You're watching A News. Now, let's take another look at one of our major stories from the region. Prime Minister Irakli Kopakidze has sharply criticised both the European Parliament and the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, rejecting recent criticism of Georgia's democratic path and accusing European institutions of applying political pressure on Tbilisi. The remarks come amid broader disagreements over governance, foreign influence legislation and Georgia's relationship with the European Union, raising fresh questions about the future direction of Georgia's European integration process. Joining me now is Dr. George Michidashvili. He's an associate professor at the European University. Doctor, welcome back to the program.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Now, Prime Minister Kobakidze's comments were unusually direct and confrontational, if you like. What's your initial assessment of this latest deterioration in relations between Georgia and European institutions?
Well, it seems that the two sides are not going to budge, are not going to cede an inch. They are hell-bent to keep their positions, and this is very unfortunate because, well, it is constitutional entry in the Georgian constitution, the integration to the European Union. We can question whether it was a wise move or not wise move, but today it seems that the majority of society have a favorable view of the European Union, see the domestic development of Georgia on the European tracks. That's why it is very sad that both the government of Georgia and European bureaucracy, parts of European bureaucracy, are so hell-bent and so intractable. We can talk about the apportionment of responsibilities, to what extent every single criticism mounted on Georgia is correct or not very correct, is like grounded or not, but certainly ball is on the court of the Georgian authorities, and well, they should at least show the willingness to continue the dialogue. So this is lacking, and this is very unfortunate.
Now, the Prime Minister made a comparison. He compared certain European institutions to Soviet-era structures. Is this mostly rhetoric aimed at Georgians? So is it directed at a domestic audience, if you like, or does it reflect a deeper strategic shift in Tbilisi's thinking?
Well, at the moment, this is purely for domestic audience. They try to show that the European Institute is not such a big deal. It doesn't have as many merits as it used to be. So, well, on several occasions, Prime Minister, actually some other top-notch officials of Georgia, they say that Europe lost its own values and its laws actually kind of like standing and moral compass and such like. So this is purely for domestic. Well, we can of course like discuss at length and see that certain aspects of the European institutions are of course wanting. They are not perfect, but up to today, the European Union and kind of the European project has been one of the probably the most successful integration project in the history of humankind. And despite its problems, of course, there is a significant case of Georgia coming closer to the European Union. Again, for all its like shortcomings, this is not the issue right now. Most importantly, for decades, European Union and European institutions have been helping Georgia to develop institutionally, to come closer to European standards. It is very sad that it is not lagging. Again, obviously, no country is perfect. We can name a number of problems, a number of issues in the United Kingdom, in some other European countries. Obviously, this is the case, but of course, Georgian authorities use it as an excuse to not to get better and not to manifest the European Union themselves.
So, Doctor, you say it's more rhetoric and it's directed more at a domestic audience. What does an alternative model in that case of engagement with Europe actually look like from Tbilisi's perspective?
Okay, these paths of the relationship and the models are manifold. So many countries of post-Soviet space do have relations with the European Union. Some countries have deeper ties, some countries have more superficial ties. Sometimes relations are more transactional, sometimes they are more actually kind of just like, well, value-based and so forth. And therefore, so Georgia has chosen to integrate into the European Union. Obviously, deviation from the path, of course, raises questions where Georgia will go politically. And we see a number of certain not very democratic laws adopted by the Georgian legislature shows that like Georgia right now is not moving in the right direction. Maybe a relationship with the European Union is not the only path to bring Georgia back like to this like more democratic path. We can discuss it, but obviously I believe that in this particular regard, the European path has no alternative. Well, because the elephant in the room is Russian Federation, of course, which tries to undermine the genuine development and genuine independence of the countries in the South Caucasus and elsewhere in the post-Soviet space, for that matter. And therefore, had Georgia been in a relative vacuum, our region be something like Australia and New Zealand, it could have been understood that, leave us alone, we want to develop just like we want, but Georgia itself subscribed to this European integration. It is Georgia which wants to join EU, not the other way around. Therefore, I may repeat it, So ball is on the court of the Georgian authorities. For all the shortcomings of certain aspects of European bureaucracy, I must also repeat it, many statements are not very judicious, many criticisms are not very well warranted, but still, so the initiative actually like to mend fences and like to find a common ground should be on the Georgian side.
So European institutions continue expressing concerns about democratic governance, as you underlined, in Georgia, while the government rejects those criticisms outright. Why has the gap between these two narratives become so wide?
Well, probably one can engage in certainly comparative analysis. So till 2012, the other leadership was at the helm of the Georgian politics. They were not noted, to put it mildly, for democratic governments, but they were far more favored by the European Union, by European institutions, by European Parliament, and EPP, the European People's Party, which was the associate of the United National Movement, actually the main opposition party, which used to be in power till 2012. So they see certain elements of double standards. Probably kind of these allegations and these criticisms has some actually kind of like rational point in this. But again, so the main goal, it obscures the main goal. The main goal of Georgian development is coming closer to Europe, most importantly institutionally, domestically. And in this particular regard, so more attempts should have been deployed by the Georgian authorities, like in order like to come closer.
So Georgia has long maintained that European integration remains a strategic objective, but can a country continue pursuing EU integration while at the same time challenging some of the European Union's key institutions, if you like?
Well, generally it is possible. I mean, in general, like to mount criticism to, well, it's like a friendly talk, right? So if the two sides are engaged in the strategic partnership, engaged in, for instance, Georgia is part of the association agreement of the European Union with all the attendant DCFTA and other agreements, so other benefits. Therefore, it is generally fine. But but the style and the style in which actually these accusations are being made, and this like zero-sum approach that if you don't stop criticizing us, we will actually kind of like abandon any ties with the European Union or like put it on hold. Of course, this style is extremely undemocratic and counterproductive.
And Doctor, one of the points of contention concerns the grants legislation and allegations of foreign influence. Why has this issue become such a major flashpoint between Tbilisi and Brussels?
One of the main narrative of the Georgian authorities that the external forces try to undermine our leadership. They try to actually instigate these like forced regime change and other so-called colored revolution and the such like. So therefore, this is being used as a pretext to harden the laws and to make the ruling of the country look easier. So this is like mostly as a pretext. Again, a number of statements, a number of actions on the part of Western partners, particularly on the part of the European Union, European institutions, have been unfriendly and could be questioned. But obviously, this is not about actually they are trying to institute a regime change. Obviously, this is a very far-fetched allegation, and the earlier the Georgian authorities abandon this, the better. For the common cause, more importantly for Georgia.
Okay, and to what extent are these disputes being shaped by domestic political considerations inside Georgia?
To a certain extent they are, because there is like political struggle in Georgia. Certain opposition forces try to come to power, as it usually is the case actually like in the political battle, and so this is generally kind of like being made like to tighten the screws and actually like to tighten the hold on power, which makes political battle more complicated. So generally, of course, like domestic considerations like do shape it to a certain extent, but on the other hand, it is also the idea and the narrative that the West will try to forcefully change the government and in the favor of the political forces who are revanchist and who want to come to power and so forth.
Now, the Prime Minister described Georgia's approach as one of strategic patience. What does that actually mean in practical foreign policy terms?
Well, in certain circumstances, strategic patience is generally a good term. It could be exercised. But when Prime Minister means strategic patience with regard to the European institutions, probably this is, well, not the right term because, well, Georgia and European Union actually come a drift further and further from each other. Therefore, it's hardly the positive application of the strategic patience. When we talk about relationship with Russia, one can argue that maybe in this particular regard, a certain amount of patience is and the ability to wait could be at the end of the day beneficial. But again, so it is a risky political game, and well, many people in Georgia believe that, well, Georgian authorities should do more, at least to show the willingness to come closer to European Union and find the common points of understanding, the points of cooperation.
Okay. Dr. Michidishvili, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev has accompanied Turkmenistan's leader on a visit to 2 areas of the Karabakh region. It marks the final day of Sardar Berdimuhamedov's state visit. The 2 leaders visited Fuzuli, where they were briefed on reconstruction work taking place to repair damage caused during the occupation period. Berdimuhamedov was also shown the construction of a large mosque that was funded by Turkmenistan. They then travelled to Shusha, where they toured residential and cultural sites. A major transit operation is underway in the South Caucasus as Azerbaijan facilitates the railway shipment of Russian cargo directly to Armenia. Over 400 tons of agricultural supplies have officially cleared Azerbaijani transit hubs heading for the Armenian border.
We are seeing significant activity on the regional transit and cargo routes today, with fresh shipments moving across Azerbaijani borders. Just today, on June 23rd, 6 wagons of fertilizer made their way from Russia through Azerbaijan, heading directly toward Armenia. To be exact, this 408-ton cargo was dispatched from Azerbaijan Railways Belachari station, moving toward Büyükesik. From there, the train will cross into Georgia before making its final turn toward Armenia. Around that same time, over at the Belachari station, Azerbaijan Railways also sent off an 18-wagon train loaded with over 1,200 tons of wheat to Armenia. To put all of this into perspective, these numbers are part of a much larger ongoing trade flow. Looking at the overall volume so far, Azerbaijan has already exported over 14,000 tons of diesel and more than 4,000 tons of petrol directly to Armenia. Well, as we can see, this regional logistics networking is running at full capacity. That's all from me. I am Leila Rahimli with my cameraman Zainal Hassanov for A News.
Baku has hosted an international conference on circular green tourism, bringing together representatives from member states of the Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia. The event focused on sustainable tourism development, regional cooperation and new opportunities for local communities. Here's our report.
The future of sustainable tourism took center stage in Baku on Tuesday. International experts, policymakers and tourism officials gathered for the conference, Circular Green Tourism in the SICA countries. Jointly organized by Azerbaijan's State Tourism Agency and the Secretariat of the Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia, the event brought together delegations from SICA member states across Central Asia, the Middle East and Southeast Asia.
In the beautiful city of Baku as a practical area of cooperation.
The main objective of this conference, as you asked, is to bring all SICA member states to Azerbaijan and create a platform for them to discuss circular economy principles in tourism, regenerative tourism, how to achieve beyond sustainability and to create cooperation and trust building among these states.
Opening the conference, State Tourism Agency Chairman Fuad Nagiev described circular green tourism as a key path for the industry's future and highlighted Azerbaijan's efforts to expand ecotourism, agrotourism and nature-based travel experiences. SICA Secretary General Kairat Sarıbay, meanwhile, stressed the role of tourism in fostering sustainable growth, cultural exchange and cooperation among nations.
If you promote tourism, you have to be environmentally friendly. Why? Because we are living in a time when the climate change is crucial, and we have to protect the environment for our further generations. So I believe promoting tourism must be very much in a sustainable way, with the due respect to our nature, to preserve the diversity of our planet for the next generation. So I believe that it is actually a trend now that instead of mass tourism, people trying to look into the cultural assets also in a sustainable way that will not damage the environment of our planet.
This demonstrates that green tourism, environmental policy.
Circular approaches to tourism allow us to think in a more systemic way. Tourism is not a sector that can operate in isolation. The sector has a very cross-cutting and transversal value chain involving from transport to food providers, textiles, accommodation, etc.
Participants explored ways to make the tourism sector more resource efficient and environmentally responsible. Through plenary sessions, keynote speeches and expert working groups, delegates discussed initiatives such as tourism villages, training programs and investments in nature-based attractions. Speakers said these approaches can help create new economic opportunities, support local development and protect natural and cultural heritage for future generations. İlknur Seydemirova with İlkin Mehdiyev reporting from Baku, Azerbaijan.
And that's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for all the latest updates.